Hey everyone, Sycra here, and recently I've had a few requests from people who want to see the process I use when I create illustrations. So I figured, okay, I have to do this illustration of a sexy dark elf who's powerful. So I might as well, record it, and then you can maybe get an insight into my process. So what I started out doing is gesture lines. So I tried to do, for most of them, not for this one, but for most of them, I tried to do like S's, like an S to begin with. And the letter S is kind of a sexy letter, if you could think of it that way, because it's got curves, right? So just having that, and then I have in my mind also runway models, because when models walk down the runway, they have this kind of confidence to them, and I figure, okay, so this elf is powerful and confident, probably, so why not? Also, the whole idea of having it kind of like a runway model is that you get this feeling of movement, but you don't have to move too much. If that makes any sense whatsoever, I'm not sure it does, but it makes sense in my head. Like, okay, you want the person kind of on the page and probably a front view to showcase the character. But then you want an illusion of movement, and usually runway models are walking straight towards the camera, or the camera is, anyway, I think you know what I mean. So then I just go ahead and flesh out things, and I mean, the thing is, in terms of process, I'm kind of experimenting all the time with different processes. This is something I really picked up from a good friend of mine called Mike Azevedo, and he's an amazing artist, and what he does is he just always experiments. And so yeah, I've started to do that more, where it's less important about the process, and it's more important that you keep in mind the fundamentals, things in terms of composition or anatomy or proportion or whatever. So here I settled on maybe using this sketch, and I'm just going to start painting. So I'm using a big chalk brush. It's one of the brushes you can get from Anthony Jones, and it's for Photoshop CS6. So I've started using brushes a bit more too, just playing around with them. In the end, though, it does make a difference, but it only makes a difference if you know how to use your tool. So if you have an idea of, okay, I need to make a brush stroke with a bit of grain to it, then you take out your brush that has like a grainy texture and you use that. So otherwise, it doesn't really matter. And also, I'm using Cintiq to do this. I just got a Cintiq 22 HD, and I really like it. I was kind of expecting that it wouldn't be that much of a difference, because I've been using tablets. Started out with a Graphire, which is worse than the Bamboos that are out now. And then I moved on to an Intuos, but I've been using tablets for around 15 years now, I think. So I'm a fan of tablets. Just it's completely different for me, the workflow, when I get to actually draw on the screen. And actually, in this recording, because I was recording, and I'm not sure if it's because I'm using CS6, but the tablet or the Cintiq wasn't behaving as nicely as it usually does. So a lot of my lines became more jagged instead of like smooth. But it's okay. It was still nice. But again, it's a tool. So, I mean, if you can't draw, then it's kind of pointless. It's a bit like, if you had a race car and you just get a normal person to drive it, they're not going to be able to drive it well. So it's just, practice, and tools are less important. But when you know what you need, then when you're hooked up with the right tool, then it definitely does make a difference. So even with custom brushes, I've heard people who say brushes don't matter at all. And I mean, it sounds nice. But I think it does make a difference. I think what they're saying is that you could do everything with just a normal hard round brush, or you should be able to. Brushes just make things faster. And I would agree with that yeah, you should be able to do everything with a hard round brush. And there's plenty of people who do. And I use a hard round brush in this as well. So, yeah, brushes aren't essential, definitely. And if you're just learning, I would recommend probably sticking with a hard round brush, because it's going to expose your weaknesses. Sometimes with textures or texture brushes, they can cover up mistakes. Things can look a little bit better than they would. So you might have a deficiency in knowledge, but you might not be aware of it because maybe a brush effect is hiding that. So I think, play around with just doing as much as you can with hard round brushes. But again, it depends on how you use the brush. And the same is true for layer modes. So using overlay, using color dodge. Again, I've heard people who say not to use anything. And actually, when I was starting out, I kind of followed most of that. I like to work on one layer with one brush and just paint the whole thing that way. And I didn't use any different things. But after a while, it just becomes so much faster to take advantage of the digital medium, because you do that with every other medium as well. So, for instance, if you're using oil paint, you can have a fan brush or a round brush, or, there's so many different brushes you can use. And so there's a built-in texture, right? So every brush in real life is a texture brush. Even with a pen, unless you're using maybe like a pen on vellum has no texture or very little, or a pen on smooth Bristol, but otherwise everything has its own little texture. So I don't know what I was talking about. Oh yeah, taking advantage of digital tools. Why not? Because I mean, at the end of the day, what you create is more important than how you created it. So, anyway, so I'm putting down a lot of stuff. I put things down and then I smooth it out sometimes with the soft brush. And I'll also use a soft brush to make atmosphere and things like that. So, anyway, as I was working on this, I didn't really know exactly what the pose was, and so you'll notice that the pose has changed a lot from the initial sketch, and it's just been a case of kind of experimenting, allowing myself freedom to change whatever I want as I go, because I figured, I think it was Craig Mullins who said pixels are cheap. And I really agree with this sentiment that, if you're doing things traditionally and you want to make big changes, especially like if you're using oil paint, you might have to scrape off all the paint off the canvas, and it's really difficult. So in digital, because it's so easy to, and things are free, you're not paying a lot of money for paints, then why not? And I added a wolf in the background because I felt, I kind of need something, and I like images that have little hidden things or harder to notice things. It's called a second read. So you have your first read. So your first read is the character, obviously. And then your second read is where your eye goes to next. So maybe the second read is actually the blade on the end of her weapon. It's like I don't know what it is. It's kind of like a scythe, but I don't know. There's probably someone knows. But anyway, it's like a stick with a sharp thing at the end. And yeah, so then the second read would be the blade, and then the third read might be the wolf. So yeah, I'm just adding ornamentation here. So finding, how, process can be changed, but there's also things that work really well once you figure them out, such as, putting down shapes and then locking the transparency, or using a clipping layer and then painting within that so that you have your boundary. Using masks, it's the same thing. And I wanted to give her something on the leg, but that wasn't following the form, so I changed it, made sure it's following the form. And this is something I've been doing a lot in this image, and I'm trying to do it a lot in general from now on, is that if something's wrong, just fix it, like, right away. And you might have to fix it a lot until it's right, but why not? Especially if you're painting digitally, why not? So now I'm just using a sharpen layer to make it a bit more clear, and then I kind of erased parts, and I'm using color balance to add a little bit of color variety. But then, oh no, Photoshop crashed, so that sucked. So I had to make some changes, and I ended up getting things a lot more purple than I originally had. So yeah, Photoshop CS6 crashes quite a bit. So here I was putting in some shoes just to make sure, to see what it looks like, because I liked how her feet looked hidden in the snow. But there's this art rule that says, you shouldn't hide feet. And I think the thing is really that people who don't know how to draw feet tend to hide feet. And if you do, then it's fine. In this case, I don't see a problem with it. So I just wanted to see, does it look better if I show the complete boot? And I didn't think it looked any better, so just got rid of that. And what else? So I'm just detailing things, and pretty much I'm done. So hope that gave you some insights, and thanks for watching.